I'm here today at the Sustainability Science Center to interview Katherine Richardsson. She's the initiator and director of the Sustainability Science Center, and I know that she has a vast knowledge about the sustainability area, and I hope that she can tell us something that we can use to go in the right direction, creating a safe place for us to live in. And as the UN says, we need development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that's what I hope that I'll find here. Thank you, Katherine, for taking time out of your day to come and talk to me about sustainability. And my first burning question for you is, what can I do and what can the audience do today to move in a sustainable direction?
Well, first of all, I would say you shouldn't be pessimistic. You shouldn't have to decide that this isn't possible, because I honestly do believe it is possible, and I think there are very good signs around us that there's a major change going on about the way humans perceive the world that they're in and their relationship with the world that they're in. We can talk about that maybe later. But what should an individual do? I think the most important thing is that an individual recognizes that our well-being and our wealth is based on natural resources. So when you use money, you would never use more money than absolutely necessary to buy a good or a service. In reality, our real money, our real currency, is our resources. So everything you do, whether it's food and food waste, or whether it's use of energy in transport or in your home, or whether it's buying clothes, everything you do is related to natural resource use. So do it as effectively as possible. Remember to treat your resources as the currency that they really are. It's more important to you than your money. Money is just a proxy for those resources.
So that would be like buying organic clothing, or maybe not buying anything?
Not necessarily organic clothing. I mean, organic clothing is good because it doesn't pollute the environment with pesticides and nutrients. But very often when you're growing cotton, for example, you can't grow as much in a given area with organically as you can conventionally. So there you have a lot of land use involved. So organic is not necessarily the best. You have to look at all the different interactions there are. But I would say buy the clothes that you're comfortable with, but don't buy more than you need. It doesn't have to be organic. It doesn't have to be expensive. Just don't buy more than you need. I had a young lady in an interview, a radio interview not long ago. So she was testing me on what I did that was good for the climate, and she said, "Do you ever not buy clothes because of the climate?" And I'm like, "Well, no." But that question assumes that I buy clothes I don't need. At the moment, I'm sitting with a sweater. I can't remember when I bought that sweater, but I could tell her that I was wearing it when I was pregnant, and my youngest son was 27. So I use my clothes until they aren't able to be used any longer. And there's a lot of people that don't do that.
Yeah. So would you say that we should go back to like buying quality like they did in the old days? You had a car and you would have it for a long time, or?
Oh, obviously buying fewer things, and that often means better things as well, is much better for the environment than buying a lot of inexpensive stuff that just gets thrown away and then you buy something new. So yes, absolutely, buy less. I know somebody who says that when I think I want to buy something, I go home and I think about it. And if I still want to buy it 24 hours later or a week later or whatever, then I go back and buy it. But I never buy it on the first impulse.
So do you know about the whole zero waste lifestyle? Have you looked at any zero waste lifestyle people, what they do? Like they go pretty far with the reusing and reducing. And
Sure. And that's really where we have to go. And if you look at nature doesn't produce waste. It all gets used again in some other way. And we're moving that way with all of our focus on circular economy and so on. So yeah, I mean that's where we have to be. We have to get to a no-waste society. And in fact, sometimes, I mean, I'm actually my field of research is in the ocean, and people are, at the moment, people are very concerned about the fact that there's so much plastic in the ocean, and I'm just amazed that people haven't thought of this problem before, because we've been throwing plastic out since the 1950s, knowing that it was basically unable to be degraded by nature. Since the 60s, we've had pictures of the Earth from space where we can see that the Earth doesn't have any umbilical cord or any pipes that go to and from. So, first of all, that tells us that our resources are limited, and when we've used them, we're not going to get any more. But it also tells us that when we throw things away, they're not going to disappear. So we've been throwing plastic away since the 50s, knowing it wasn't going to degrade, knowing since the 60s that the Earth doesn't have any way in and out, and that the ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface. Where did we think the plastic was going to go? And it's the same with climate. We thought we produced some waste products that we thought were gone, but they're not. They're in the atmosphere around us. So we need to be thinking in terms of not leaving any waste behind. When we start now using the ocean even more, and this is the last frontier, and this is what we're going to use now, and this is what's going to keep us. Yes, but let's learn from what we did wrong on land. Leave no waste behind, and make sure that when you impact or destroy ecosystems, that there are similar ecosystems that can continue to thrive under their own undisturbed circumstances.
What do you think we need to look into legislation, or should we look at design? Because I'm thinking if we use more time on design, maybe we wouldn't make products.
I don't think we'll use more time on design until there's a demand for it. So legislation has an important role, but legislation can only happen at the level of the individual nation state or the town or whatever. And what we're really talking about here at the moment is the fact that we need to somehow regulate or govern our resources at the global level. I assume our ancestors, when they stopped marching around and looking for their food and started living in one location, that they initially let all of their waste products just fall wherever they were produced, and they took whatever they thought they needed from nature to make energy by burning it or for food. And then they realized, no, we have to make some rules about this, because we're running out of some of these things, and for our own sakes, we're getting sick of the water that's polluted. For our own sakes, we need to make some rules about this. Then we realized that we also need to make some regional rules, because if we want clean air and water around us here in Denmark, for example, we can't let the Germans and the Swedes and the Poles throw all their waste into the air or into the water. And what climate change and a lot of other global changes are really telling us is the fact that we need to manage our resources at the global level for our own sakes, not just for the sake of saving the planet. The planet's going to do just fine, thank you very much. We don't have a global governance, and we don't want a global governance or government. But we can have governance at the global level without a government. But that involves nation states playing a role. It's probably a role for the UN as well. It involves non-state actors, it involves businesses, it involves you and me. We make legislation, or not legislation, but we do govern at the global level when it comes to markets, for example, and trade agreements and so on. So we can do governance of global resources, but it's not done just by making laws.
Do you see that the UN can go in? I mean, now they did the Sustainable Development Goals, and I know that you've been working pretty intensely with those because you're part of a panel of 15 people.
Right. We've been charged by the Ban Ki-moon, the earlier General Secretary of the UN, appointed 15 people to write the next global sustainability report for the world, and this is coming in 2019, and it's really exciting work, but it's a lot of work, because when you bring 15 people together from 15 different disciplines and 15 different cultures that are trying to write about the entire world, it's a big job.
I could imagine. So you've been working with this report. Do you see anything happening already? Like are there some countries that are in front of the other countries, or what?
Definitely there are countries that are ahead of other countries, but that's not really what we're trying to do. We're not trying to go in and give everybody a grade. No. What we're really trying to do is to try and identify areas where we have to plan transformational change. Now, what does transformational change really mean? It means that we have to plan our way out of a problem. And the Sustainable Development Goals are wonderful because they give us a vision for where we want to go on lots of different areas at the same time. And we know when we make a vision or set a goal, for example in health, like eradicate polio, then it really helps us make progress. Also, we can see for renewable energy, huge inroads have been made on renewable energy because we had this clear goal. For many of the other areas, we haven't had clear goals, and the SDGs give us some clear goals. It also then makes it possible for us to look at where we are now and say, can we, with incremental change, get from here to where we want to go? If so, then it's just a question of turning up the gas and getting there. But if we drive out of our garage to go on holiday and want to go on our holiday in Australia, and we only have a car, then we're not going to make it. So we have to actually make a new plan to get to Australia. And it's exactly the same way here. In some cases, it's clear. For example, our food systems, agriculture, it has to change. We cannot go to where we want to be with the Sustainable Development Goals if we just continue along the track that we have there. So what we're trying to do is identify systems or activities that require transformational change, planned change to get to a new place, and how we can instigate that change. What pathways are there to make those changes? So it's not a question of going in and ranking all the different countries and saying, oh, there's a bad one, oh, there's a good one. But also pointing out the fact that although these are global goals, they play out differently in different parts of the world and in different regions. And for example, developed countries think we don't really have a problem. Well, look again. When you look at SDGs 12, 13, 14, and 15, that is to say, sustainable production and consumption, climate change, biodiversity on land, biodiversity in the ocean, almost every developed country is failing, and we need to really make some changes there.
So you're actually almost coming into my next question, and that is...
Sorry.
that is, so do we have some SDGs that we actually should prioritize? And are those the ones you just mentioned?
No.
No?
I won't say that.
You wouldn't say
that?
The
really important thing about the SDGs is that they are 17 and they cover all of the activities that humans have. Until now, every time we've made a global convention, it's been focused on a particular sector. It's been climate, biodiversity, women, arms, weapon reductions. They've all had a specific topic, but nobody's ever before tried to bring them all together. And of course, the way the system works and our interactions on the planet are because of all of our combined activities. So it's absolutely wrong to cherry pick the Sustainable Development Goals. What's important, I mean, some will be more important than others for certain activities, but what's really important is everything we do will have both positive and negative consequences with respect to the SDGs. Until now, most companies and countries have been focusing on everything that's positive, and oh, this is green growth and synergies and win-win. But it's not all going to be win-win. The important thing about SDGs is that we also get a chance to look at the lose together with the win-win. And to develop sustainably, we need to, of course, exploit synergies. But at the same time, we have to be aware of where we're having negative effects and reducing those negative effects.
Mm-hmm.
So sustainability is all about finding the sweet spot, the compromise between the synergies and the win-win,
Mm-hmm.
which was green growth, and the costs in terms of the other SDGs. So I would say they're all equally important overall, and you always have to test any activity that you have. I mean, something like agriculture or food production actually impacts all 17.
Mm.
So they would never be able to choose.
Yeah.
Although most would go in and say, "Oh, this is all about reducing starvation." But it's not just about reducing starvation. It's about all of the other goals as well. Whereas some particular issues in health, for example, might not hit all 17, but we can't say that any SDG is more important than the others.
Okay.
There's a time limit, though, on some of them. I mean, the climate one is one that we have to act on right here and now.
Mm-hmm.
But the climate one also interacts with every single other of the SDGs. So keep them together. That's what they were made for,
Okay.
and that's what makes them special.
Okay. Actually, I do have the SDGs on cards here. And one thing that I'm a little bit puzzled about is number 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's called decent work and economic growth. And that did puzzle me a little bit, the growth part. Can you elaborate on that?
What you have to remember about the SDGs is that they aren't a scientific or an ethical product. They are the product of negotiation by politicians.
Mm.
And of course, economic growth is what has, that's what the development of human societies have been based on. And there's no politician that's going to come to a meeting and a negotiation like that and say, let's drop economic growth. So a lot of people recoil at the economic growth. Oh, this is awful, and this is terrible, and oh, we can't continue. No, we can't continue the way we are now, and that's what the SDGs say. And in fact, there is a very clear sub-target under goal number 17 that says develop metrics that will augment GDP that can be used to describe well-being. So essentially, I think what's lying at the bottom of this is A, the fact that politicians aren't going to come and say no economic growth, but B, I think we all recognize, also the politicians, that we need to change the metrics that we use to evaluate our growth, and they actually call for it here. A lot of people say, well, we just have to drop economic growth. Well, does that mean we're supposed to just drop everything we know about economics and wait until somebody finds something new? I don't think so. So I think it's about tweaking the economic tools that we use. And I think Kate Rayworth from Donut Economics from Oxford, she just wrote a fantastic book that's called Donut Economics: 27 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And you don't have to be an economist to read it, and it's wonderful. And she basically says, listen, we can use the economic tools we have in order to be able to and to be sustainable at the same time. But we just have to think a little differently. So I understand why you recoil a bit at that goal, but certainly the decent jobs part of it is nothing that we can be unhappy about.
Exactly. But I'm also thinking if we have to reevaluate our values.
Of course we have to reevaluate our values. There's no question about that.
Because right now maybe the economics is
no question about that.
There.
But I think that's happening. And you see so many companies who are implementing the SDGs, and I've really fought to get the SDGs. So, and I think that there is a change happening, and I think even hardcore mainstream politicians in most countries accept the fact that we have to rethink our values.
That's nice to hear. That makes me happy to hear. I listened to this radio program called Sidste Mand Slukker Lyset.
Yeah. I know that
Have you heard
one.
it?
I know that. I've been on it.
Well, the last person turns off the light would be the English version. And they talk about climate change, the name climate change, that they actually thought that it could be a good idea to change the name. What do you think about that?
I think that's the most absurd discussion I've ever heard, to be perfectly honest. I guess one of the arguments goes that, people reacted much more to the ozone hole than they do to climate change. Well, the word hole itself isn't really very worrying. I have a hole in my tooth, I have a hole in my underwear. I mean, it's only when you put it together with ozone that people get shocked. And change is in itself, it's just like hole. Change and hole, those are words that we use all the time. And what should be really scary is we put it together with climate. So I think it's that people don't really understand the ramifications of all this that makes them, or maybe it's because it's a long-term change that they have a hard time appreciating it, and most people don't really appreciate the ozone hole either, to be perfectly honest. So I don't think we're going to get anywhere by changing the name of climate change. What worries me even more, though, is the fact that people are getting the idea that sustainability and climate change are the same thing. And if we just solve climate change, then, everything is going to be just fine. The whole point here is that humans are now impacting the planet at the global level. That's why we need to manage our resources at the global level. So this is global change. It's not just climate change, it's global change. And I honestly believe that just as important, perhaps more important than what we're doing to climate, is what we're doing to the rest of the organisms that share this planet with us. And the biodiversity on this planet is so crucial for establishing the environment, the state of the planet. The life on this planet is what makes this planet different from every other planet in the universe. We have all planets have climate, because climate's only about how much external energy are you getting from the sun, and how do you store it, and how does it interact, and how does it move around. And all of them have sort of elements and molecules that make sort of like building blocks. But on all of the other planets, those building blocks pretty much don't react. They're pretty inert. On Earth, we have biology that transforms and transports the elements and the molecules that we have. And that's what gives us oxygen in the atmosphere. That's what gives us the ozone layer. Every time it's been possible to get enough energy out to be able to live, organisms have evolved to do it via the transformation or the transportation of these different elements. And what humans are doing to the rest of life on Earth is shocking. And we will pay a price.
Yeah. So we're upsetting the order of things, and we need to remember that we have to take good care of it.
Well, we need it. Yes, we need it. I mean, first of all, I think there's an ethical issue. Do we, as a species, have the right to take the lives or remove and I don't believe we do. So there's an ethical issue here. But at any given point in the Earth's history, its state, or the environment which is dominated on the Earth environment as a whole, if you want to call it that, has been the product of the co-evolution of biological activity and climate. That's why, as I say, where do we get the coal, oil, and gas? Well, when green plants evolved, the bacteria that break down lignin, that is to say, can degrade green plants, hadn't evolved yet. So you got this huge concentration of plant material that ultimately got buried and became coal, oil, and gas. Today, we have these bacteria that break it down, so that wouldn't happen again. So there's biology is just so important for making this planet what it is, and therefore we're so dependent on it that if we don't stop our massive destruction of it, we'll ultimately ruin our possibilities for survival as well.
What do you think we need to do? Do we need to tax our way out of it? Do we need to legislate our way out of it?
Well, again, taxes and legislation that's our way of thinking in terms of in nation states, but we're talking global at the moment. And the good news is we've seen this before in with the ozone hole, and we did get a global agreement that had solved that. Now that was a real simple one compared to most of these other ones here, because of the interaction there is with our economic development with most of the other activities. But still, it shows that it can be done, and we do regulate, as I say, trade agreements at the over government level, at the global level. So
how can we push for that? How can we push for that to happen?
Well, it is happening. If you look at what's happening, I mean, one of the things around the convention in the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, it has a conference of the parties every year. And newspapers always write about it, or media always tells about it, and it always gets a failing grade. Why does it get a failing grade? Because it doesn't solve the problem. But if you actually look at the level of ambition and commitment that the different countries come with year after year, that's not standing still. There's been a tremendous increase. So we are developing the mechanisms to be able to regulate climate change on the or human perturbation of the climate system at the global level. Whether we do it fast enough is another story, but it's happening. And once we manage to develop the mechanisms to do that within climate, we have some tools and some knowledge that can be used for all of the other areas where we also need to do the same sort of thing. Now, many people will complain and say, oh, well, the UN is, it's a bad place to do it, and it isn't really equipped to it, and if anybody votes against, and it's the lowest common, yes, that's true. And it isn't designed for this purpose. But it's a little like the economy, which isn't designed for working in a world where human demand for resources is now beginning to exceed supply. All of our economic models were developed when our demand for the Earth's resources was very small compared to the supply. And now we're getting somewhere else, and our economic system isn't made for purpose. We're having to redesign it. The UN isn't made for this purpose either. But if we say the UN's not right, so we have to develop something new to do it, do you know how long it's going to take to make a new parallel UN that maybe is designed in a way that's more effective for what we're trying to do now? Why waste time doing that? Why not try to tweak the system that we have into working? And it is working. It just... Many of us would like to see it work a whole lot faster, and maybe it has to work a whole lot faster if we're going to get onto a trajectory where we can have development of human societies that can be sustained. And that's what I call sustainable development. It's nothing sort of green and sort of, it's development. Human societies have always developed, and they will continue to develop, we hope. If we want that development to continue, to be sustained, we have to make some very real changes. Not least because we're on track to be 9 to 10 billion people by 2050, and every single one of those people has a right to development.
So I think we're getting at the end, and I have a last thing for you, actually. So I brought this relay, and it's because I would like for you to send us on to the next person that you think would be good for us to interview.
I think the next person that you should hear from is Stine Hildebrand. And Stine Hildebrand, because you were so worried about the economy and business and so on. And Stine Hildebrand is a very good. I mean, he came from the business school at Aarhus, and he focuses on leadership of companies and leadership within companies. And he's absolutely convinced that the SDGs are critical for the development of business. So I think he's the man you should talk to.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Katherine Richardsson. It's been a pleasure, and I'll take home with me that every choice I make is a part of the change. And I'll be here on the blog, We Turn, and I'll write about things, and I'll interview people, and hopefully I'll get a hold of Stine Hildebrand as well, because he's the one that I have to pass this one on to. So please stay tuned, and thank you for joining today on We Turn.